Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is gonna be a Vampire Covenant against Vampire Covenant battle report. We are doing some preparations for a tournament that will be held in Eindhoven in September. And it's another one of these Bloodstorm events where basically it's all about the fun. And yeah, you're encouraged to bring lists that are suited for the tournament, but that are not necessarily overly competitive. I think I found quite a decent list for this. I don't know if it either tips on one side of the scale or the other, but so far I've been having quite some fun with it, and this is the list. So I have two Vampire Courtiers, both on Monstrous Revenants. At the event, there's plenty of bolt throwers usually, so it's gonna be fine. And also me showing the list, people can just tune in and see what they have to bring, basically. Um, Otherwise, I have a Necromancer who's my general. He's a Wizard Apprentice with a Necromantic Staff. I have a Banshee just for these juicy terror charges on 3k points. I have the Core of Skeletons, I have a Dark Coach, some Baronites, and a Phantomhost unit, and a Varkalak. So it's a bit of a mix and match of different pieces. I do have the Baronites for some mobile scoring. And at the event, you're actually also going to get a Wizard Master that is added to your army. So that is quite exciting. It gives you access to some spells that you would normally not have access to. I'm still doubting whether I want to go for the... There's two versions of this Wizard Master that you can add. One is really offensive in the spells that he has, and the other is more supportive with all kinds of combat buffs. So I'm not really sure which one to take yet, but we will see during during my further preparation for the tournament. I'm facing off against another list that is actually also Vampire Covenant. It's a new player in the area who's also getting to the grips of playing Vampire Covenant. So we are playing a practice game. For me, it's a practice game for the tournament. For him, it's just a regular practice game. So we also don't include yet the tournament rules for this battle. We're just playing a pitched battle without any scenario, just to get a bit of a better grips on the rules. Yeah, he also has vampires. He has a Von Karstein list, so it's a bloodline list. That's why his score is a bit bigger than mine. He has a vampire count with Unbreakable Will, which makes his unit stubborn. And then with True Thirst. True Thirst is quite good at smaller scale games. So first we'll have a small collection of pictures. So this is my side of the table after deployment, and then my opponent also has some nicely painted models. The rates were his last edition, and his coach is also looking quite impressive indeed. Let's then get started with the game. My opponent already dropped one of his skeleton units. I counter deployed with some Baronites. I don't really want to give away yet where my skeletons are going to be, because that will form the main battle line for my army basically. So I'd rather just first drop down the 2 units of Baronites. Probably at the event this will be the same, especially since a lot of armies will have probably some counter to the Phantomhost, so I don't want to drop these first thing I do. The Dark Coach is also quite a sturdy piece, so I don't want to drop that. I might actually just start also just with the skeletons if it's really clear where the 3 units are going to go, because they will go together. Because at 3000 points it's quite impressive to just have the ability to get an arise through, which is also why I have a Wizard Apprentice with the Necromantic Staff. So my opponent drops at some point to get a +5 on the starting roll. And then I finish the rest. So for my deployment from left to right, I have Phantomhost, Dark Coach, Skeletons, Baronites, Skeletons, Monstrous Revenant with Mesmerizing Gaze, Monstrous Revenant with Dragon Staff, Baronites, and the Varkalak. The Varkalak is vanguarding up to deny my opponent the possibility of running past my lines with the Direwolves, because they don't have any light troops, so they are kind of stuck in going forward. For my opponent, he has from left to right Wraiths, Dark Coach, the Barrow Guard, then a unit of zombies, I believe, with his Necromancer or Skeletons, I don't remember. Then he has his Skeletons with the General. The General actually did not go in the Barrow Guard. That also makes sense because of the magic item or the bloodline setup with Unbreakable Will, because well, he has Stubborn now in the skeletons, whereas in the Bear Guard he would have already had Stubborn because he's the general. I don't know if it's better play to play him in the skeletons or in the Bear Guard. I think in this matchup specifically it's better to put him in the Bear Guard, because then it really becomes a block that I cannot grind down with my army. But yeah, that's what that is. Then on the right, my opponent still had a unit of skeletons and obviously the direwolves. And my opponent has the first turn. First turn, he tries to cast some magic. He has basically two spells that I really want to stop, which is the Arise and the Dead Arise. So that's the unit that, or the spell that makes new zombies. I put priority on dispelling Arise, so the new skeletons, more skeletons to his units, which makes it that he can cast the Dead Arise and put a unit of zombies towards my lines. I don't really care at this point about the zombies because I can quite easily get rid of them. However, if I do charge into them, then he has plenty of counter charges ready to go. So my turn, I do take the risk of charging with the Varkalak into the direwolves because I don't have that much to lose. I mean, if I do get a field charge, then the skeletons are still quite far away from me. And even then, a matchup with the skeletons into the Varkalak, I think I'm quite confident about, seeing that I have a 3-up Vampiric on the Varkalak also. Otherwise, I shuffle up a bit. I actually allow my Necromancer to get out of the units. Because in that sense he can still be in 6 inches of everything, and not have the risk of being targeted, basically because my opponent doesn't have any ranged spells. I also should note that the Banshee on my army is in the most left unit of skeletons. I try some magic, I don't manage to do any magic, but luckily the Varkalak manages to mow down the direwolves, and the Monstrous Revenant in the middle of the field is actually not in contact in my turn with the zombies. It's my opponent who charges in with the zombies to my Monstrous Revenant. I thought this would be better because then on after this turn I would get free again from the zombies and then could move anywhere I wanted. And then otherwise my opponent doesn't have any charges really. So we do shuffle up a little bit. Well, both of us shuffle up a bit. It's quite a funny matchup in that sense because we both have just sturdy infantry blocks. Not at this point for me, to be honest, yet. And my opponent also only has the Bear Guard still. But with 3k and the ability to arise new skeletons to the field, it can quickly grow to quite a decent size of skeletons. And then, yeah, it's just gonna grind against each other. So you really need the advantage of getting a flank somewhere, getting a rear if you can. So mobility is quite good there. I tried again to dispel my opponent getting extra skeletons. Maybe this was a mistake because in this way he can actually get extra zombies to the unit that I'm in combat with, and this kind of shifts the dynamic in this combat to the sense that I'm not getting out this turn, but I will be getting out probably next turn. And if I get out, then well, I'm going to be faced with an even shorter charge than before. So this is actually not that convenient. On the left flank, I saw that my opponent gave me a chance to shoot with my Banshee at his rates after marching. So then in that case, if I'm going to go up with the skeletons, I might as well also go up with the Dark Coach. So I do take the charge onto his Dark Coach because one-on-one, I think I can grind him out if I do get the charge. And well, the same applies to his Dark Coach against me, obviously. But then again, I still have my magic support closer to the coach than he does. He does have Stubborn, however, I will have had the charge, so that might even out. And then it's basically down to the dice, what's going to decide. But my main priority was to just deal with the left flank through the Banshee mostly, because d6 plus 2 hits actually. With magical attacks at strength 4 on raids is quite juicy. And then he could charge into the Phantom Host, but I'm gonna strike first with magical attacks once again, so it's not that bad. The only thing that I didn't realize is that I gave him a flank charge on my middle skeletons, which obviously is not that good. I do try to get an Arise through, and yeah, basically that is it. The Varkalak doesn't want to go into the skeletons on the right because I think I need him somewhere else. The Monster's Revenant, the big one, just stays back a bit, ready for counter charges. I have the Baronites on the right that want to stay out of charge range of the skeletons. And then basically we pass over to my opponent's turn after I summon a couple more skeletons. It's my opponent's turn, so my opponent also sees the flank charge on the skeletons. This normally would be quite a challenge to get into, however the raids have Reaper, which means that they can move through enemy units, and I believe it's also during the charge phase, but I might have to check that, whether it's only the movement phase or also the charge phase. Yeah, so he declares the charge there. He also declares the charge with the Barrow Guard onto the same unit of skeletons, and he declares the charge with the skeletons in the middle of the field against my Monster's Revenant. So in the end, he has 2 charges that make it, and he has 1 charge that fails, which is the raid. And at this point, I'm like, wow, okay, incredible. That actually means that I'm gonna just completely dominate that flank, I think. Because I have a charge into the raid with not only the skeletons, including the Banshee, but also with the Dark Coach and with the Phantom Host. And then afterwards, as there's so much that's going to go into the raids, I have an overrun with the skeletons onto the Dark Coach. So that would be the ideal scenario for me. And also the fact that he doesn't get any raid support into the combat in the middle I would have estimated that if both of them had gone into the skeletons, I might have just crumbled down all the way to the man. Not sure, because I don't think he could get all the raids in, and then it would have been like 8 plus 3 attacks, 11 attacks, hitting on 3 plus, wounding on 2 plus. In addition to the attacks from the Barrow Guards, but then again you also still get a flank in addition to all the other combat res. It would have been dicey whether I would have held or not. If I had not held, then that would have been a big problem, because then it would have been quite a challenge to come back from that. On the other side, he did make contact with my Monster's Revenant. He is gonna just completely annihilate it through combat res. And then he has an overrun actually on the Black Knights. This was completely unnecessary. I shouldn't have given him an overrun there. Might have been a bit more cautious there. So this is also a bit of a learning moment that while I do have my Necromancer who can make my Black Knights march, and I do have the Dark Coach who can do that. However, just leaving Black Knights or Baronites on the flank in the first round of the game, just as the first drop for deployment, it does make them quite immobile, even though I can play them 3 wide. So in my turn, it actually happens as I had fantasized. I do get all my charges into the raids, and I also get a flank charge into the Baronites, Barrow Guard, I mean. Whilst my skeletons in front of the Barrow Guard have been whittled down a bit. This does make quite a nice corner for my Necromancer to hide at, because my opponent doesn't have any ranged damage output, I can easily hide in spaces where I'm quite useful. And it also increases the combat performance of my skeletons, because normally you cannot really charge in with a Necromancer against something like Barrow Guard, especially with the multiple wounds 2 against standard infantry models. And then we have the Varkalak who moved over all the way into the backfield of my opponent to threaten his Necromancer mostly. I set up also the Monstrous Revenant, the big one, for the counter charge, or for any kind of charge onto the area with the Barrow Guard, and I also tried to just mostly get away from my opponent's vampire count and his big block of skeletons. Because, well, if he charges my Monstrous Revenant, then I'm just dead. As we saw with the other one, I'm just gonna die. I unluckily failed my March check with the Monstrous Revenant, so I would have liked to go further away. This is all that I could do. But I do have my second unit of Baronites to countercharge if I would want to, which is quite unlikely, to be honest. So combat-wise, with the raids, I do manage to kill the raids down to 2 raids, I believe. They don't really do any damage, and then I get an overrun onto the Dark Coach. And then afterwards we do the combat with the Barrow Guard, and I actually do quite a number on them. So I do a couple of wounds, but more importantly, I just have a big flank with a lot of ranks and 2 banners, and it's mostly just combat rest that starts to whittle them down now. So my opponent is faced with some choices here. One of the choices is to charge in his necromancer in his bunker into the side of my skeletons. It would help a bit with the combat res. However, we talked a bit about it, and we were like, yeah, your unit is decently sized. My unit is still quite big. You might be able to get rid of the skeletons in front of the Barrow Guard. However, you're probably not going to get rid of the bigger block. And then you're kind of stuck, and you're going to open up some charges. So, for example, the Monstrous Revenant can join if you whittle down my skeletons. I have a Dark Coach ready to strike to go into the side of your Barrow Guard. They might reform afterwards, but then you want to face either towards my skeletons or you want to give them a big rear. So it was not that ideal for him to go in. But then he did try the charge with his skeletons with the count onto my Monstrous Revenant. Unluckily, he failed to charge. Personally, I think I would have gone just for the closest charge, because then you get back into the game rather than spending a turn not being in the game. He could also have moved up, obviously, and not tried to charge. We are already down in turns quite a bit. I had my, let's see, 1, 2, 3rd turn now. So this is his 4th turn, I believe, if I'm right. So you really want to get some revenue out of your model still. So that's what makes it kind of difficult. In my turn, I do manage to charge in with my Monstrous Revenant onto his Necro Bunker and with the Vakulak in the rear. And I get the Dark Coach in the side of his Barrow Guard together with my Phantom Host. So the previous round I did not manage yet to wear down the Dark Coach that's engaged with my skeletons. However, over time I will be able to crumble him down, because I still have my static combat res of 5 with the Legion banner. And that is just too much for a Dark Coach to handle, even if it's stubborn. And I must say, the Banshee really pulled his/her weight in being able to pick off some wounds from the Dark Coach as well. So that was really helpful. I think previously I underestimated Banshees quite a lot, because the damage output doesn't seem that impressive. It's in combat it's only D3 plus 1 strength 4 hits. However, they are hits, and they are magical hits, so they do make sometimes a bit of a difference. It's quite a resilient character with a 3 up Aegis against any attacks, and you anyway rely quite a lot on static combat res with Vampire Covenant, so the Banshee is not often that much of a big target even for your opponent, because they also want to make some combat res. And even if she is a target, then, well, there's still a 3 wound hit pool that you have to go through. yeah, so we go to the combat in the middle. I believe I managed to regrow some skeletons, if I'm right. I'm not sure, actually. But I do allow myself to set up a bit of a trap with my Baronites sacrificing themselves, unfortunately, to keep my opponent's vampire count and his skeleton buddies out of the way of the rear of my unit. I do manage to dissolve the barricade of my opponent. I do manage to continue the grind onto my opponent's necromancer bunker. And then my opponent's turn, he charges in with his vampire count onto my Baronite. He's obviously going to win that combat quite heftily, and my Baronites just disappear. However, this turn is also the turn where his Necromancer disappears. So at this point, it looks like I lost my both Baronite units and a Courtier on Monster's Revenant, and my opponent still has his count and 2 units of skeletons left. So I'm not too unhappy about the performance of my army so far. We still have a couple of turns to go. My opponent still has a lord that I don't really have an answer to, especially since my Monster's Revenant is actually still going to be stuck in combat for another turn together with my Varkulak. Because his Necromancer just survives with 2 wounds remaining, I believe. So I was planning to just go all in on the next turn with both the Varkulak and the Monster's Revenant and the Dark Coach, because the Dark Coach might still be able to charge in. Now I basically have to delay it 1 turn. I want to draw him closer so that I get more guaranteed charges, so I put my Dark Coach in a spot where I can later see my opponent's unit if I turn the Monster's Revenant. I reform my lines a bit, and that's basically it. And then, yeah, for the rest, I summoned some more zombies. We're both summoning some zombies just for the fun of it. I screamed down some zombies with my Banshee because, well, you have to do something with your Banshee. And then we conclude that the Necromancer has no more will to live. And we pass over basically the turn to my opponent. My opponent is quite eager to take the zombies that I summoned from him. The zombies are going to be dispatched off. My opponent still tries, I believe, to charge my Varkulak with skeletons, because otherwise they won't do anything anyway. And then they can lock the Varkulak to make it not be able to go into combat with his big block. He does manage to kill off my zombies, and then afterwards he can reform for the upcoming turn. So the upcoming turn is going to be my turn 6, and yeah, basically it's going to boil down to me trying to get everything in contact possible. So I'm going to bring my static combat rest with the skeletons, and then I will bring in my Monster's Revenant, my Dark Coach, and my Varkulak. And I can choose whether I want, well, one of them has to go in the corner, either the Varkulak or the Monster's Revenant or the Coach. The Coach is the best protected here, so I put it up against the Vampire of my opponent. However, I can also already still perform a duel. I kicked out the champion of my opponent before, so I give my champion to the vampire count of my opponent. And then I start raking up the kills on the skeletons. And I believe the combined damage was like 17 wounds on the skeletons. That was quite decent. My opponent did a couple of wounds. The skeletons didn't really do anything against the Coach and the Monster's Revenant, but my opponent did 3 wounds, I guess, to my champion. So he loses by 14, more or less. Well, with Unbreakable World, it gets halved to about 7, and he still survives with his vampire count and the unit. So after tallying up the points, it's going to be a 15-5 to the independent vampires. So I had an enjoyable game. I hope my opponent did as well, but I believe so. So yeah, with that, see you next time.